I just finished talking with Shawn Duncan from FCS Ministries, and they work in South Atlanta, and they're actually an organization that I followed for quite a while, but I hadn't yet reached out to. So this conversation is a time when we're meeting for the first time, and I am just so blown away and excited about the work that they're doing and the model in which they operate. Essentially, for people that have been following along for a while, they operate within that helping without hurting mentality. They actually, Bob Lupton is the founder of the Lupton Center. He's part of FCS Ministries, and he wrote the book Toxic Charity, which I've referenced quite a few times in being very similar. That's this whole helping without hurting idea that we talk a lot about in Love Light Stories. So in this conversation, we've dug into a lot of different things, but we talked about how the recent happenings in our world and the racial tension in our country, and specifically what's been happening in Atlanta, how imperative and important those relationships and the model in which they operate, how important that has proven to be in a time of crisis like this. And it's just, this conversation is filled with a lot of good tidbits, and it's something I think you're really going to want to watch.
Well, Shawn, thank you so much for joining me today. It's really an honor to chat with you. I've actually followed your work at FCS Ministries and the Lupton Center for quite a few years. I came to know about you through the 410 bridge work that we were doing, going to Haiti. I was reading about helping without hurting, and I saw Toxic Charity was referenced there, and really learned that kind of it's the same mentality and everything. So anyway, it's the first time we've gotten to meet, but I feel like I understand your work a little bit, and I'm really excited to chat about it today. So thank you so much. Yes.
Thank you.
Is there, could you just, maybe we can open up and start talking a little bit about the mission of FCS Ministries, and then just how the Lupton Center is part of that?
Yeah, absolutely. So FCS is a 42-year-old community development nonprofit, been working in Atlanta for all of those years. We partner with one neighborhood at a time to produce holistic development strategies that bring about flourishing neighborhoods. And so there are multiple divisions that, since our goal is place-based and it's comprehensive, we have a lot of different divisions to the work that we do. The division that I'm in charge of is the training and consulting side of what we do. So after doing this work for 40 years, and after our founder has written a number of those books, there's been a lot of interest in our model and our philosophy and our principles. And so about 5 years ago, I came on the team to help them start the training and consulting side of what we do. So other organizations that are out there that are looking for more effective ways to respond to material poverty, or looking for how to partner with places to do long-term development, that's where my team comes alongside them to help them with the training consulting they need to do that work.
That's awesome. Okay, I didn't even realize that that was your role, so that's really neat. Okay, so since we're talking about the model, can you just can we dive in a little bit as to what it is?
Yeah, so the kind of shorthand description we have for the model that we use is called holistic neighborhood development, which is a way of saying that we believe that work should be place-based. Oftentimes we think about poverty as an issue or a population, and it to some extent is that, but we found that the most determining factors of whether someone emerges out of or remains within chronic material poverty is really based on geographic factors. Where do you live? And so places are kind of where the hub of all of these systems work or don't work for families and individuals. And so FCS for the last 40 years has really sought to hone this idea of place-based work. And so when we say holistic, what we mean is comprehensive, right? That it's not just about education. It's not just about jobs. It's not just about housing. It's not just about health. I mean, you're not going to disrupt chronic material poverty if you're not being comprehensive. Like, we can't A better job, vitally important. But if that doesn't come with stable housing, so
Yeah.
there are all these different components that create or sustain material poverty. And so we're trying to work in a comprehensive way. And by development, we just mean that we want to see sustainable change over time, that we aren't just measuring how much activity we do, but we're trying to measure actual change over time. So holistic neighborhood development is the model that we are implementing both within historic South Atlanta, where we're located, but also with other organizations that we're doing consulting work with.
Okay, great. So help me understand the way in which you go about it, because I read toxic charity, I've read helping without hurting. I understand they're different. There's some similarities. And so when you're working with an individual, it's my understanding that it's not ideal to just give them a house, right? How do you build up, like, how does your model handle that in Atlanta?
Yeah, so our model is deeply relational. So we lead with proximity. And so even though we're doing significant development work with economic development or housing, we don't kind of just impose that strategy upon a neighborhood. Where we started with historic South Atlanta 20 years ago was through the work of neighboring. So people that lived within the neighborhood or moved to live within the neighborhood, this work began with relationships, with partnerships, with an invitation to be a partner in the long-term well-being of the neighborhood. And so much of what we do is about partnering with. So even in our mission statement, it says FCS partners with. Those are the first few words in our mission statement. And partnering is not an accidental or a throwaway term for us, that we don't work with neighborhoods that don't invite us to work with them. We don't believe that poverty is a permission slip for us to show up and start working. Like that there is there's agency there. So we believe that is about your voice, owning and your own neighborhood and saying, this is our place and we want you to be a partner in that place. And so most of what we're doing is looking through the lens of partnership and long-term development, and not just what are the needs and how do we get resources to meet those needs, but how do we build a partnership with a place, with people for long-term development.
I love that so much, because that's what essentially the 410 Bridge does in developing countries, right? And so it's fun to see it taking place in our own country and in my own city in Atlanta. But so okay, that's wonderful. So can we talk a little bit about the various ministries or outreach ministries within FCS Ministries?
Yeah, so there are kind of three main kind of pillars, we could say, within the neighborhood kind of based development work. So one is neighborhood engagement. As just said, like, we lead with proximity. We don't lead with program. We don't lead with strategy, though programs are important and strategies are crucial. It'll be hard to find an organization that is as committed to strategy and sustainability and financial, wisdom. So we do all of that, but our lead is with proximity and relationship. And so our neighborhood engagement piece really is kind of embedded in everything that we're doing. And there are official and unofficial things that we do. So there are, food co-op programs, there are youth programs. There are lots of things that we do within neighborhood engagement that has like specific programs with a name that you could recognize and donate to, right? But there's a lot we do with neighborhood engagement that is just about being neighbors and being engaged in the Civic League meets once a month, and we're going to show up at those meetings. Or, it's Halloween, and so we're going to have a fall festival party in the parking lot, or, we're going to do a kickball tournament. So there's just lots of stuff that's probably not going to show up on a website. It's not a program that you volunteer for. It's just a part of neighborhood life. And whether that's like supporting a next door neighbor or advocating our collective voices together for a bigger issue, like just being embedded in neighborhood life is essential. Like you can't do, so this idea of holistic neighborhood development can't be done from a distance. Like you have to be embedded in a community to do that kind of work. So neighborhood engagement is one of those three main pillars. Another one is economic development, that you're not going to disrupt chronic material poverty without reweaving the structure of economic systems within a community, right? And so we're starting businesses, we're thinking about jobs, we're thinking about employment, we're thinking about entrepreneurship. We're doing a lot of work in kind of just economic development space. And then the third thing would be mixed income housing. Like if people can't have safe, affordable, stable housing in a healthy environment, the chances of them emerging out of chronic material poverty are very low. And so mixed income housing is a major, major component of what we're doing. So, so those three kind of broad categories really define a lot of the work that we're doing within historic South Atlanta.
Yeah.
Neighborhood engagement and mixed income housing.
Okay, wonderful. And as you were talking, I understand, because I live in Atlanta and I'm in this space, but I think it's really important or helpful to highlight, like, why is that part of Atlanta needing this type of holistic development? Where do the roots come from? What's the underlying issues there?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, what's interesting is that historic South Atlanta as a neighborhood originally was really developed around Clark Atlanta University, which is a historical Black college. That's a key part of Atlanta's narrative over the years. And so, you know, well before the turn of even the 20th century, so in the 1800s, this is a neighborhood that was built and created by African-American leaders. So, and it was in partnership with the Freedmen's Society. So like there was a partnership between majority culture, minority culture to even donate land, to say we're going to give ownership of land to African-American community. So a university was built, a seminary was built, businesses were built, homes were built. So if you come to South Atlanta today, you know, most of the streets names that you're going to read are named after professors and presidents of that university. And so again, before turn of the century, this was built, established, and it was this thriving neighborhood for African-American families. And really through years of disinvestment where the university has to move, businesses depart, you begin to see kind of a different turn in neighborhood. Yeah. And so just deliberate decisions made around housing, around businesses, around education, end up taking a neighborhood at one time was this thriving economic, social, religious hub into a neighborhood where there's tons of vacancy, tons of abandoned property, and there's lack of businesses, lack of educational. So much had been taken. Had been this disinvestment from neighborhood. And so what we've sought to do over the last 20 years is kind of this reinvestment. Can we rebuild businesses that are locally owned and run and locally beneficial, right? Can we reweave that fabric of housing to look and be what it always or once was, right? Can we think about these future opportunities in a different type of way? So this it's not like we're starting something that never existed, right? It's really restoring what has been before, and we're a partner in a long history of great things. We didn't start this, we didn't invent this. These weren't our ideas. We get to play this role in this season to restore what has been before.
Wow. Yeah, that's beautiful. And I love too that your model comes right alongside of that, and talking about changing the narrative and how we reinvest in communities and people and build relationships. And when you do that and you see the beauty that is there and that is coming out of the area, it's really it teaches a person a lot about when you create friendships with people that you might maybe not otherwise would have because you weren't in that area. And now you come in there and you're reinvesting in the area, and you see the beauty that's been there all along.
Yeah, and that's something that we, from like the consulting training side, is like is inviting people to see what's already there, to see what's already happening, to know that there's a story that existed long before you showed up. I mean, there's always a danger when we hear people who don't have proximity to the community. I mean, so we don't doubt the sincerity or the burden to support or serve or care for a community. But if there's a proximity gap between the person who cares deeply and the community that they care deeply about, that there can be visions, ideas, strategy, all this kind of stuff can emerge. Even their sense of calling can emerge in them that's really
Yeah.
disconnected from reality and what's really taking place. And so we're trying to invite organizations or leaders to say, can you take the posture of listener, of learner, of partner first, right? So like one of the things that we'll say is especially if you're a majority culture person and you're seeking partnership with a predominantly minority neighborhood, you shouldn't lead anything for at least a year. It's kind of our rule of thumb. Like don't come, don't lead, don't start, don't build, don't create, don't innovate. Like what you need to do is kind of submit your voice to the voices of that place and listen and learn, because it will radically change your heart and your mind and your sense of what needs to be done. Because if you just kind of drive through a community, you might immediately start having those ideas of what you could do or what should be done. But the challenge is to say, how do you kind of put all that on hold and just say, can I be a neighbor first? And through that, develop the trust or relationships and the credibility to partner with others for some long-term work.
Oh, that's so good. I'm so glad you talked about that, because I think that's key. Like that's the underlying piece that makes it all work. Because if we come in with this mentality that we understand the situation, we know what the issues are, and we know how to fix them, we're going to get it so wrong. We're going to waste so much time, money, everything, because you're right. The reality is only the people that are already there, that are doing the work, that are living there, know really what assets they have, right? The things they have that are good, and also the things that that can be improved, and where others can partner with them and come alongside them in that. So that's gold. I love that so much. Thank you for talking about that. Yeah. Okay. So I've been watching recently during all these crises that our world has been having, right? So starting out with the pandemic, and then recently with all of the racial tension and turmoil and everything across our country. But Atlanta has been a huge hub for that. And really your community and area in South Atlanta has been part of that. So at whatever level you'd like to talk about it, would you just want to share something about, what's been happening, what you've been doing about it, things that you've been involved in?
Yeah, I would say, like, in moments like this, whether we're talking about, COVID-19, or we're talking about the continued fight and cry for justice, it makes such a profound difference to have established roots in and with the community, versus, and again, so with my role, I get to be in conversation with leaders and organizations that are spread around the country who are doing lots of very different types of work. And the difference between organizations that have long-term established proximity and credibility and their ability to adapt and respond in moments like this versus, and again, it's not a difference of sincerity or sacrifice or generosity. Like all that can be totally equal. But when there isn't like proximity, long established trust and credibility, the ability to respond to these are so limited, because most of what you are basing your action upon, well, let me say it this way, both will base their actions upon the best knowledge they have access to. And because of the proximity distance, your knowledge is going to be so limited, right? That like, the assumptions about what families really need or how they're really struggling or what we should do, like, because there's so much distance, so there's one leader that we're working with in a cohort, and we were talking about this idea of credibility, relationship, proximity, all that kind of stuff. And it was right prior before COVID shutdowns and all this stuff started happening. And they emailed, kind of 2 weeks in, and they were like, had we worked on this proximity thing a year ago, this would be so different right now, because there's just it was like taking your best guess at how to help people, how to serve people, how to respond. But the way that FCS has been able to respond to our neighborhood with food security or housing insecurity because of, loss of job, loss of wage, inability to pay rent. So we're just able to navigate all these issues so very differently, because this is not just issues, right? These are people, these are neighbors, these are names, these are faces, these are families that we've been in a relationship for a long time. These are people who pay rent to us monthly for the place where they're living, right? I mean, so there's just so much. These are people that we see in our grocery store every week, right? Your ability to adapt and respond to a global health crisis that creates global economic crises, like, it just becomes so different. And so that long established relational credibility is such a different component. And so, which the same becomes true when we're talking about police brutality, right? And so Rayshard Brooks, that was in the news. I mean, him being killed at that Wendy's, that's South Atlanta. And so that's like literally our offices are a half mile just around the corner from where that Wendy's property is located. And so when that happens, it's like, this community being a majority minority community already experiences the pain and the trauma of continued police brutality against Black and brown men. But then it happens in your own neighborhood. It's like, oh gosh, it heightens the trauma. It heightens the intensity of it. And it becomes so different between, like, there's the neighborhood experience of what happened in their own neighborhood. And then there's the like regional experience that comes to the neighborhood to participate in protesting, or even the national attention that comes to neighborhood to participate in that, versus kind of what the neighborhood is going through. And those aren't always the same thing. Like, frustratingly, most of what we saw the Saturday after it happened, I'm looking at the Sunday newspaper or whatever, and I'm like, yep, the lead image on the front page is a Wendy's burning down. And I'm like, you know what? I was down there that whole night, and that was not the lead story, right? Like, there was 1,000 things happening that had nothing to do, and there were like 4 people who burned down a Wendy's, when you got hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people doing so many, all day long, there was all kinds of groups doing all kinds of things. And then, like, you get 4 people who did this one terrible thing, and then that's the lead narrative, right? And so, but in the community, you're like, because there are even people in the parking lot, I'm like, literally saying, what are you doing to this building? They're going to blame that on us. Why are you doing this? This is not helping the cause, right? And so, but the external narrative about neighborhood becomes so different, right? And even those who think they're helping, and even as we were a part of things on Saturday night after that took place, like, some of the things people were saying or shouting or calling for, it's like, it's clear that you care and you're passionate, and we're glad that you care and you're passionate, but it's also clear that you are not embedded in this work in a day in and day out kind of way. Right. Or your voice would be different, your presence would be different, your requests would be different. And so for us, it's like, how do we, because our building was also, vandalized and throughout that promise. But what was fascinating is, like, to see the community respond. We didn't have to come to our own defense. It's the neighbors who were saying, like, what, don't touch this place. This is a part of our neighborhood. And like, and so the response becomes so different, because it becomes about a community rallying together. And so, like, we believe that we have to have voice on national, local, state level. But that voice emerges out of a specific neighborhood. It's not just some generic Black issue or community issue or policing issue or national issue. Like, this is us, this is our neighborhood. And so being able to, again, navigate it from like a deeply rooted place is going to be very different, right? And so, like, and even just to hear, like, having walked through that and then hearing what, our family members who live in other states, what they're saying and what they're reading and what they're interpreting, is like, no, this is all so wrong. It's so missing the point as to what's really taking place. And like, and so it's hard to, like, how do we, collapse that gap through good storytelling, through good communications, through conversations. My friend and colleague of mine have been doing some Facebook Live conversations. We've done 4 or 5 of them, kind of these hour-long dialogues into all of this and kind of what it means and how we're navigating it. And just trying to figure out how we collapse the gap for people to kind of get past the sensationalism and the headlines and kind of get into, like, no, there is real trauma and real injustice happening for real people. And there's constructive, healthy ways to engage this. And there's And there's ways to ignore it, and there's ways to blame it, and there's unhealthy ways to engage. And so it's hard to sort through all of that, but our best way of doing it is, again, out of that place of like being rooted.
Right. Oh my gosh, that is such a really good example of what we were just talking about building the relationships and the importance of that, and how having an external mindset really can't help or serve in a lot of ways because you're not rooted in the community or in the area. Wow, that's really, really powerful. And I think that happens all the time with the headlines of sensationalism, and it's really too bad. And hopefully through the work that you're doing and what comes out of the beauty that can come out of a crisis can maybe change the narrative on a grander stage too. I mean, I know I saw that the community came together and started painting beautiful murals, right? And that creates a picture that people can visually see and understand. And maybe that's helping to change the narrative too.
Yeah. I mean, that just to see, it was funny. So, it was on a Monday late. So, whether it was like Monday midnight or Tuesday AM, it was late. And so Tuesday morning, we're kind of waking up to, shattered glass and all things that can be repaired. Nobody was harmed. The word gets out, and, I think all four of the kind of local news media, stations in Atlanta, all want to come. Right. And by the time they showed up, like, we've already got everything boarded up. We've already painted the boards the same color as the rest of the building. So what you don't see is like wood clearly covering broken glass. You just kind of see a wall that's kind of monochromatic, and so and we could even, as they were like talking to our staff of trying to they were looking for violence has erupted and this nonprofit has been hurt by the violence. And we're just like, nope, not our story. That's not what's happening. Yeah. And there's just an amazing artist who basically did sketched a mural, which we could basically paint by numbers. And so we've had, I don't know, 100 different people kind of come through and paint different sections. And and the community just saying no, not our story, and we're not going to embody that story for you. We're not going to play out that drama for you. What we're going to show you is what resiliency looks like. We're going to show you what a strong community looks like. And this is not us. Right. And so, and so it's been this real interesting zone to live in, to say a different story needs to be told. A more accurate story needs to be told than the one that people are used to listening to.
As you were telling that, I was just thinking of in crisis, the true colors come out. And you're talking about painting by number and all the people, and I'm thinking of all the colors. And really, truly though, if you hadn't built this strong, in-depth relationship and relationships in the community at the level that you have, I mean, they're your friends and you're their friends, essentially, that they wouldn't the community wouldn't be able to come together in a crisis like that and be painting beautiful murals and all that. So anyway, I think literally and figuratively, the true colors are coming out.
I mean, the couple of days later, I just, reached out to a couple of our leaders, and I was like, this has been the best example of the quality of what you all have been doing for years. I mean, I've been on the team for 5-6 years and have been in partnership with them for a little bit longer than that. But, our executive director moved into the neighborhood 20 years ago. And so, she was kind of right out of college and has gotten married and had kids and has lived her, full adult life in that neighborhood. So she's had 20 years of partnership in this place. And I'm like, this is the fruit of, I mean, there's so much more than just that, but this is the fruit of that, right? You invest for the long haul. And when this kind of thing happens, you don't have to rush to your defense, and say well, this is why this, the community stands up for you, right? Because you're a part of it, right? And it's not, it's not your thing you're having to defend or justify. It's no, this is, and when other people have, there've been other moments where people have accused FCS of this, that, or the other. And it's community residents are like, nope, that's not what's going on at all. This is actually what's happening. And, and that's, again, that's just, it's credibility and that was the DNA that was established in this organization back in the late 70s, right? Before most of the staff was ever around. It's this was an organization that said, you can't do this work from a distance. You can't, until we collapse that, until we really have that proximity. I mean, it's not just about relationships, because there are systems that have to be transformed. There's development that has to work. There are big strategies and big investment. I mean, there's a lot that goes on, but the foundation of that and the thread that runs through it all has got to be that proximate stuff.
Yes, love it. Oh, wow. This has been awesome. Before we go, I'd like to ask, how can people get involved in what you're doing, whether they want to volunteer, donate, anything like that? Where can they go?
Yeah, I would say, for as far as kind of the FCS side and the work in the neighborhood, like, just start following us on social media. Because the model of FCS is so different, we don't have like established weekly rhythms that make sense for volunteering. We try in as much as possible for the work to be neighborhood driven. And so we do use partners and from a volunteer stance in very specific strategic ways, but it's not in these kind of like consistent rhythm type of ways. And so I'd say follow us and start getting engaged from that standpoint. As you begin to track with the narrative, you'll discover ways to find the best way of engaging. And whenever we're allowed to be in each other's presence again as a group, we do host twice a year an open house. And so in the spring and in the fall, in a normal year, we have about, about 50 people twice a year will come and spend 2 days with us, just walking the streets of the neighborhood and seeing everything that we're doing. So that would be really the greatest way to get an introduction to the work of FCS in South Atlanta. So it may not be till spring of 2021, maybe by late fall, early winter of 2020. We still don't really know if that'll happen. But from the Lupton Center side, if you work for an organization, a church, a program or initiative that's seeking to address poverty, and you want to see greater impact there, then reaching out to us just through our website, luptoncenter.org, would be a great way where I could hop on a call with any one of these leaders and just begin to understand what their challenges are and how we could come alongside as a partner to help them address that.
That's awesome. Wonderful. Thank you so much, Shawn. This has been an incredible conversation, such an honor. And thanks again.
Yeah. Thank you.
Wow, I am blown away to learn more about what FCS Ministries does and how they operate in the community specifically, but how the testament really of the work and the model that they've embodied for so long, how they're seeing the fruits of that per se, specifically in this time of crisis where we've been dealing with the global pandemic and now the racial tension across our country, and specifically in South Atlanta, half a mile from their office, and they were in the area that all of this was breaking out, and just how the community has rallied around them and how FCS Ministries also rallies around the community. Essentially, they have each other's backs, and it's so beautiful. And only that can happen through deep-rooted relationships, time, trust, and all the things that Shawn was sharing. And I just think that is, in crisis, like I said, true colors come out, and those colors literally came out on the walls, and figuratively and literally. So anyway, I'm just really excited about just so much of the potential that they're creating and allowing to happen through the community in South Atlanta. And this is an organization that I hope we hear more from, and it's just incredible. So if you found this interview to be inspiring or it touched you in some way, please share it with someone that you care about. Comment below, because I'd like to respond to you. And actually, this will be the last video in this series, so you won't see any more videos on this channel for a while. Love Light Stories is in a season of growth, so we're not going anywhere. We're hopefully going up there. We're hopefully growing, and we have more things in the pipeline. And so because our country has started to open up and things have been changing a little bit, I decided to end this series. I decided it was an appropriate time to do that. and that'll give us some bandwidth to be able to move forward in other areas. So you'll be seeing more interviews like this. There'll be more interviews with people telling their own personal real stories as well as we move forward. So there's a lot of exciting things coming up. So I would encourage you to still go to lovelightstories.com, where you can sign up for emails. You'll receive monthly stories there, as well as emails and any of the other goods that we have going on. So until next time, I'll be thinking of you, praying for our world, and we'll see you again soon.